don't think I've ever done this. I implore you to come next Sunday. And there's a reason. I've spent a lot of time studying a phenomenon that's going on right now. Very interesting to me. An explosion of Jewish people trusting Jesus. I am seeing it all the time. I've listened to probably 50 testimonies of Orthodox Jewish people. You know, the long beard and the cap, whatever they call that, and all of that, trusting Yeshua as the Messiah. Of the 50 or so, probably a little more than that, 50 testimonies I listened to, almost every one of them said, I read Isaiah 53, and I thought, that's Jesus. They've been told growing up that they don't need to read Isaiah 53. It's a phenomena that has blown my mind. I asked myself the question, what does that mean about the Lord's return? With so many Jewish people starting to trust Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah. I think there's some indications, and I'll talk about that next week. What does it mean where Paul says to the Jew first and also to the Greek? I think it's a lot deeper than the cursory reading that we give it, and I'll talk about that. Did you know in the first century, population experts say there were about 3 million Jews in the world in the first century, 3 million. They said they believe that about 1 million of them were followers of Jesus. Different than we see today. Have you ever witnessed to a Jew? I have, man, and they are harsh in what they think and what they believe. To them, some of the things I've listened to in these testimonies was that the word Jesus is almost like a cuss word. That many don't even realize that Jesus was Jewish. That some of them said, I thought he was Italian because of the Roman Catholics. What is happening right now among the Jewish population is blowing my mind, and I think it's important that we listen to it. I've been talking to a Jewish man who is now a Baptist preacher. Talked to him 4 or 5 times. His uncle was one of the head rabbis in New York City. His uncle sat on and was a participant in some of the Nazi trials in Jerusalem, where they got those people. I mean, a very high-level Jewish person as rabbi. This guy has been very interesting to speak with. So I'm asking you, please come next week. I think it will be enlightening. I think it will be very biblical, the things that I will say, but it's things we don't hear about often unless we are looking to find out about these things. So please come next week. Now, on to today's lesson. I'm not sure that I will be able to adequately convey what my heart and mind desire to convey today. But I think it's an important subject as well. Did you guys hear the other day about those 2 17-year-old kids that saw a bicyclist driving in the bike lane? I think it was in California. And the other says, let's run over them. And they pull over, and it's all on video. I saw some of the video. I couldn't watch it to the end. That would have turned my stomach. But are you guys looking for the teenagers? They are in, would you mind? Okay, thank you. And they saw this guy, and they pulled right behind him and plowed him over. And on the video, they're just laughing at this. And they said, we knocked the guy out. Well, they actually killed the guy. Did you hear about the Patriot football game where there was a Miami fan in and I guess the Patriots are in Boston, some outside of Boston, and a fight broke out, and a guy killed the Miami guy at a football game. We live in a weird, crazy world, a society that's filled with violence. There is a lack of love, and there's a lack of friendship for others. Having friends is important. It's important in our lives to have friends, true friends. Very, very important. I think having a friend, everyone here needs the type of friend that I'm going to talk about. I'm talking about an earthly friend. I think it's something we all want. I've seen kids cry because I don't have any friends. I think there's something in us God put there to desire friendship with people. I had a guy, and I won't say his name, this is probably 15 years ago. He asked me to go get a cup of coffee with him or maybe dinner with him. And he said this, "Jeff, I want a friend." Well, of course I'll be your friend. Of course I will. Then he went on to say, I want to hang out. I said, "I will be your friend, but I don't hang out." That's not, at that time I was probably 40-something years old. I don't hang out, but I'll be your friend. I will be your friend. I've known another guy for 38 years. I have probably been out with him socially, going out to dinner or whatever, 2, 3, maybe 4 times in 38 years. He's a dear friend, Bob Allen. I would do anything that he needs. It's a great distinction between being a friend and somebody you hang out with. What I'm talking about today is about being a friend. Somebody I know I can count on. Somebody who can count on me. Talking about a friend that if you're in need, Ada, is going to come running to you because you're their friend. Turn to 1 Samuel chapter 18. We all need that. We need that person in our life. 1 Samuel chapter 18 and verse number 1. "And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul." Again, in verse number 3, it says, because he loved him as his own soul. I wonder this. Do we have friends or a friend like that? Are we a friend like that loves that other person as their own soul? After David's victory over Goliath in chapter 17 of 1 Samuel, Jonathan's soul was knit with David. That word knit means, does anybody here knit? I don't know what instruments you use, but I think you're taking things and you're tying them together so that they become one thing. His soul was knit with them. There was an immediate connection with Jonathan and David, and a bond that grew stronger and stronger, though they didn't hang out with each other. And I'll show you that in just a minute. As the circumstances of life happened, David always knew that Jonathan would come running. And Jonathan knew David would come running. I'm talking about something that is very important in our life, to have that person that will come running. The friendship between Jonathan and David, it was unique. It was different. It was intimate, not in the way that we often think that word describes intimate. It was close. They knew each other's heart. And the friendship was mutual. But, you know, it shouldn't, those type of relationships, everybody here, everyone here should have that type of friend that is knitted together, that is unique, that is a bond, somebody that we can count on at any time, in any place. I don't know that Jonathan had that type of friendship with anybody else, but he had it with David. It does Jeff a world of good to have that friend, and it will do you individually a world of good to have that type of friend. Yeah, obviously, the Lord is that type of friend. I'm not talking about that relationship. Everybody here should have the Lord and we should be the Lord's friend. I'm not talking about your spouse. Obviously, the spouse should be that type of friend. If it's not, brother, we have a tough time in life. Your spouse should be that type of friend. I want to talk, those should apply. The Lord should apply as this type of friend. The spouse should apply. I want to talk beyond that for the purpose of today's lesson. They truly, Jonathan and David, truly loved each other. It was so strong. It was so strong that the love that David had for Jonathan extended beyond Jonathan's death. Do you know that? Look if you would at 2 Samuel chapter 9. The love that David had for Jonathan extended beyond Jonathan's death. His friend was now dead. And what did David think about his friend? 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. And David said, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" We're talking about true love. You know, that would solve probably all. That would solve, I'll go out on the limb and say, all relationship issues, if there is that type of love one for another. I think today it seems difficult for some to find a true friend. I do think it's a craving that everybody has, but we find it difficult to find that friend. Those who truly love each other and those who are moved to action because you need something in life. You know, people frequently say, and I've been listening to myself over the past few weeks as I've thought about this. People frequently say, "I love you." Do we really? Do we really? Do we truly mean what we say? You know, if we did, and I am conveying this because I believe it's truth and it's factual. I mean no ill intent by this next statement. If we did truly love someone, divorce would never happen. It would. We would battle through. I've told you many times, come from a kid where dad was married and divorced multiple times, so I understand all that. If we did mean what we say, when we tell a friend, "I love you," they would be our friend through thick and thin, no matter if they did something to upset us. How many of us have had good friends that are no longer friends? I think this is an important thing. I've thought about how I interact with each of you. And when I tell you I love you, I want it to be real. I want it to be true. And I want to mean it. Linda, my wife, is not a hugger. She does not like to hug. I said that for Phil. And I asked her one time, why? She said, because when I hug somebody, I want it to mean something. And if I hug everybody, what does it really mean? I respect that. It's being real. Jonathan is a good example of someone who truly loved his friend David. And he proved it by his actions, the things that he did. How did he prove his love? You were in 1 Samuel. Look at verse number 19. I'm going to read 6 verses here. 1 Samuel 19, beginning at verse number 1. How did he prove his love? Number 1, he spoke good of David. And Saul spake to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Saul's son delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul my father seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore I pray thee, take heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where thou art, and I will commune with my father of thee. And what I see, I will tell thee. And Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee-ward very good. For he did put his life in his hands, and slew the Philistine. And the Lord wrought great salvation for all Israel. He sawest it, and didst rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause? And Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, as the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. Here's the picture. In chapter 17, David kills Goliath. Saul wouldn't go out there because Saul was scared. David went out there and fought and killed Goliath. And the guy that was looking to kill David should have loved David for what he did for Saul. Do you realize that if the Philistines had won, what they would have done with the king of Israel? Do you understand what they would have done to Saul? They would have killed Saul, which was what they did back then when they won victory over their adversaries. It would have destroyed Israel if Goliath and the Philistines would have won. David removed the shame that Saul, I'm sure, felt. David protected Saul's leadership, ensuring that he remained king. Obviously, he would have been deposed. Yet, he wanted to kill David. Why? You know, I think that often that's the type of friend that we are. Petty jealousies attack. And rather than love, I'm looking to do away with that guy. Though they've done so much for me, I'm looking to do away with that person. Instead of gratitude, there's jealousy. And Saul, from that day forward, wanted to kill David. I'm going to be very bold and say this. If we speak bad of people and we say that we're that person's friend, we are not. We are not. that action shows that we're not their friend, and we act a lot like Saul. I've seen it over and over in my long life. If we can talk negatively about someone that we say is our friend, what kind of love is that? What kind of love is that? Is that a Jonathan love or a Saul love? During the meeting that Jonathan had with King Saul and his servants, Jonathan proved his love, not only by speaking truth, but by speaking good of David. Think about the words that come out of our mouth about others. My desire is this: anytime I talk about her, I want it to be good words that I convey to somebody else when she's not around. And you, and you, and all of you. What are the words that come out of my mouth about somebody else? I have to brag about Eugene. It's just coming to mind right now. I spent a lot of time with him and Phil. And I've seen subjects come up where I knew some history about the subject and about people. And I saw Eugene refuse to say anything bad about another person. That's a Christian thing to do, Eugene. A true friend doesn't just sit back, doesn't talk bad about somebody else. When the opportunity arises, they defend that friend. I'm going to just be really candid. If I hear anybody talk about my preacher, I'm going to battle. I am. No, nobody is. I'm going to battle because that's my friend. And the same thing with you guys. I'm not going to put up with anybody talking down or bad about my friends. Are you seeing the point that I'm trying to make? It's a real thing in life, how we interact and prove that we're our friends. Look at Proverbs 31. I want to show you something here. I found this very interesting. Proverbs 31. I better turn there. I don't have it written down. In verse number 8 and 9. Open thy mouth for the dumb, in the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. That word dumb is not primarily talking about what we think, deaf and dumb. They can't talk. That dumb is this: somebody that can't defend themselves, somebody that can't speak up for themselves. The Bible tells us, open thy mouth for the dumb. That's exactly what Jonathan did for David. When I'm studying, I go off on all kind of rabbit trails, and excuse me for that, but I thought, okay, who wrote Proverbs? We see. Primarily Solomon, yeah. How did Solomon know to write verse number 8? To basically stand up for the dumb? I can, in my mind's eye, this is what I see. I see David sitting down, and he sees Solomon. Solomon, come here as a little boy. Come here. I got to tell you about a time where my friend Jonathan spoke for me and defended me when I wasn't even there. And I can imagine that was just in Solomon's mind as he's writing 31, verse number 8. Do we stand for our friend and speak up for our friend? So number one, Jonathan spoke good of David. Number two, look at 1 Samuel 20 and beginning at verse number 30. Jonathan stood up for his friend. 20 and verse number 30. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, Thou son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. Verse number 32. And Jonathan answered Saul's father and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. In the time of David's need, Jonathan stood up at the expense of possibly his own life. You saw where Saul picked up that spear, and the good old Southern word, he chunked it. I had to say that. Carl will know what I'm talking about. He chunked that spear. And, when we speak, there are times that we can stand up for a friend and speak, and it takes care of everything. There's no issue beyond that. People hear what we're saying, and the issue is over with. There are times that speaking doesn't do it all. And you have to stand up. You're not going to talk about my friend like that. Jesse and Rochelle. We got a story about them that conveys how much Jonathan-like they are with friendships. Someone went to Rochelle and was blasting me and Linda. Things that weren't true, or weren't factual. I mean, blasting us. A very negative thing. No, they might have been true about Linda, but they weren't about me, obviously. Very negative things. But unbeknown, and I won't tell you what they were, because none of them were true, but unbeknown to that individual who was talking to Rochelle and Jesse had lived with us when they first moved to Memphis and spent, I don't know how long, 3 weeks, a month or so, had lived with us for quite a while. And Rochelle told this person, what you're saying, I know is not true. I live with them. The person said, oh, and shut up. Thank the Lord for a friend like that. That's what Jonathan did. Do we? Do we? Who is the friend that we need to stand up for? Who is the friend that we say, no, you're not talking about them in front of me? I'm thankful for Jesse and Rochelle. I am. I love them. And they've proved their love. When Jonathan, we got about 5 minutes. When Jonathan stood up for David, it cost him. Do you know what Jonathan was doing when he did that? He was taking the crown off of his head and handing it to somebody else. He was giving up everything for a friend. Everything. Would we do that? I ask myself these questions. Would I do that? Would I give up everything for my friend? I make my dad mad at me and calls me the son of a perverse, rebellious woman. That part may be true. Even after the confrontation with his dad, he was still faithful to David. It shows the depth of love. I think life is about relationships. I don't think it's about the money we have or lack thereof. Life is all about relationships. And if we can get this concept down, it will change what life is like for us. People first, things second. And Jonathan understood that. Things second, people first. It will revolutionize how we see life. It almost cost him his life to stand up for his friend. My phone just does that sometimes. I don't. Does anybody else's phone do that? Just start speaking to you? Does it? First I said, yes, Lord, here am I. But do we realize this also? That Jonathan's actions strengthened David. Think about what David was facing. He was on the run. He was on the lam, as they say. And the Bible says in 1 Samuel 23:16, and Jonathan's son arose and went to David in the wood and strengthened his hand in God. Jonathan was willing in David's most perilous time to go to him and strengthen him in God, weakening his own position, causing more peril for himself, putting himself in. I read a book years ago by a guy named Gale Sayers. Does anybody know who Gale Sayers is? Football player, one of the great running backs of the NFL. He played for the Chicago Bears. And he wrote a book, and I read it probably when I was 11, 12 years old, because I love sports. And the title of the book was this, I Am Third. And his premise was God, family and friends, and me. He understood what Jonathan understood, that self comes after everybody else. And my suspicions are this, that Jonathan was a joyful man. He's a man, I guarantee you, who loved life, who, because he was living his life for somebody else, the surest way to have a miserable, wretched life is to write a book and say, I am first. That's the way to have a miserable life. Let's be Jonathan-type friends. Let's love people. Let's do for somebody else. I think it would be wonderful if we look around and say, man, they have a need, and I'm going to do something about it. Not showy, not in a showy. There was somebody attending our church. Lynn and I probably were in our 20s still, so it was a century ago, long time ago, and we could tell they were struggling, and so we went and bought some groceries, and we took it to their door and knocked and ran so that they wouldn't see us. You know what? That did more for us than spending that $100 ever could. Let's love people. Let's be concerned about somebody else the way Jonathan was about David. We're dismissed.